in the early 90s, did some market research and marketing consulting in an optical retail franchise business. Then in 1999, the franchisees asked you to help them buy the franchisor out. It took a year or so. And so in 2000, you started as president, grew it from 100 locations to around 130, doing around 130 million annual revenue with 3 to 16 team members in the head office. You left the business a few months ago after structural issues in the industry are seeing the business declining now down to around 60 locations. So congratulations to you on the growth of that business and your business journey so far.
Trusting in the concept of faith and not allowing your mind to dwell on fear, things that you're imagining could go wrong and could be bad. I'm a believer that you find what you look for. And if you keep looking for all the bad things that can happen, they will. But if you also devote yourself to looking for the good and the opportunity, you'll find those as well. So that is a mind shift to replace. I call it replacing fear with faith, and that's an exercise that the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing John D. Marvin from Texas State Optical, based in Houston, Texas, United States. Thanks for your time today, John.
Well, thank you very much, Troy, for inviting me to be here.
Let's start with how we know each other. Polly from Let's Get Your Media Attention Today put us in touch a few months ago, and you've got quite a journey to share with us today, and also quite an exciting recent announcement you've just told me before you hit record.
Yeah, I've been I guess I'll start with the announcement and then back up. I spent 25 years as president and CEO of Texas State Optical up until June 30th of this summer, and I made it clear to everyone with the company as well as people in the industry. I didn't do so out of retirement. I did so just to do something. I decided I was going to do something different. I feel like I'm somewhat of a builder at heart, and I spent a lot of time building Texas State Optical. And through circumstances that are going on in that industry, the board of directors decided that they did not feel comfortable with some of the situations of change that were going on. And I felt like I didn't want to just sit by and watch something that I'd put so much time into kind of fall apart, so to speak. And so I decided to leave tactfully and professionally and do something else. And so, but I got started in it because my background really is marketing management and consumer research. And my first involvement with Texas State Optical is I was hired by the corporate office at that time. This was in the early 90s to conduct a large consumer research study. They'd never done anything like this. We did several thousand interviews over the course of a couple of years, and then about 60 to 65 focus groups testing advertising messages, positioning statements, and so forth. And when you do a study of that size, you really become intimately familiar with the company and also, as important, if not more so, the customer. And so that's kind of connected me to the organization, which at that time was a group of franchisees. And I was then retained by the franchisees to help them establish a franchise association, work on some development projects for them. And then in the late 90s, 99, I was hired to help them acquire the company. The franchisees wanted to purchase the franchisor. And for good reason. The company was kind of drifting at that point. The average age was in the late 50s of the optometrist. It's an organization of private practice optometrists, like I said, franchise model. And the average age was late 50s, and they had about 100 locations. And unless something changed, they were going to have 70 locations, and they'd have 60 locations, and people were either dying or selling their practices through retirement. And so the organization really didn't have a bright future to it. And so the franchisees said, let's buy it and let's take it over ourselves. And took us about a year, but we negotiated the acquisition. And during that time, I was asked if we were able to pull this together and make this happen, would I be willing to come on board full time as the new president of the company? And I agreed to do that and did that in 2000. And so, and we built it up to the 10th largest optical retail chain in the country, 130 locations and little over $130 million in aggregate revenue of the members. But we created it as a brand license organization because the Texas State Optical brand was established in 1936, and it was, something iconic in many ways. And certainly at that time in the early 2000s, one of the things you would commonly hear from people, especially at that time over the age of 40, would be that Texas State Optical was where their parents had taken them for their first pair of eyeglasses. And so people had a really neutral to positive impression of the brand. And so we felt like there was an opportunity to work with young optometrists that wanted to start and build their own private practice. By licensing the brand, they got instant credibility. And so that was the business model that we launched with in the early 2000s. And we grew it up to this network of these independently owned. We lost, we lost several in the transition period, but recaptured and net grew, like I said, to about 130 locations. Also, we lowered the average age of owner into the low 40s. And so we brought in a whole bunch of young optometrists that really secured a future for the brand at that time. And that was kind of the task at hand. I took the job because I thought this is a great fixer-upper, and it's got a great legacy in terms of its brand value and consumer value. And if we can make it relevant and keep it relevant, then it'll do well for everybody involved. And a number of things happened in the 2020, the 2020 time period, in addition to COVID. But as we were talking a little bit before, private equity came into our industry in a big way in the 2014, 2015 time period. And because of the state laws in Texas, optometry in the U.S. is really legislatively governed state to state. So laws will vary from state to state. And because of the laws in Texas, private equity were not able to come in early. They had to figure kind of a workaround through some of these legislative restrictions. And they did that. And in 2019 actually, started coming in a pretty big way. And so by 2022, 2 years in, we had lost over 40 locations to consolidation. And at the same time, there is a change going on with young optometry, just like in other aspects of healthcare. Young optometrists were not interested in practice ownership. And just like in family medicine and pediatrics and dentistry and others, the young professionals coming out of schools saw optometry as a really good part-time profession. And so if our model was predicated on working with young ODs who wanted to own their own business, and those people were no longer coming out of school, then it became hard to replace the ones we were losing. So we were left with really our best option was to offer a hybrid model where we too would secure investor partnerships and we would start acquiring practices to grow a corporate platform, but at the same time continuing to offer a path forward for the independent, the private practitioner. And we wrestled with that for 3 years. And finally, the decision was made at the end of last year that they just did not want to do that. And by that time, we'd lost more offices. And so the right now, the problems of inability to retain, inability to grow, and the consequence of a declining brand value among consumers, those are the core issues the company faces. And the board of directors, which are comprised by the owners of the members in the we structured it as a member-owned cooperative back in 2000, and so the members of the organization, the ones that were left, had decided that they did not want to get involved in the corporate entity process, and so there really just wasn't a whole lot to do other than to solve this problem because they've lost. By the time I left in June of this year, June 30th, we'd already lost another 10 offices. And it looks like there's probably going to be another 20 to 25 by the end of this year. So, and no one's leaving because they didn't like the company. They're leaving because they were given an amount of money for their practices they couldn't turn down.
Right.
So,
So in when you finished up in June, so how many were you around the 130 mark locations or?
no, we had dropped down to about 65.
Wow. Okay.
And
Yeah.
they've got another, and then that's as of June 30. And then, like I said, there's another 25 that are in discussions to be sold. Probably will happen before the end of this year. So, it's another big hit. And
Mm.
there's just not enough young optometrists to come out. And those are startups. Of course, private equity consolidation results in companies buying your biggest and your best operators. And so, a brand new, even if you had, 40 new optometrists, they're doing startup, cold start businesses that won't reach that maturity for another 5 years. And so it takes about 3 to 5 years to get to the maturity level and the volume level that an office that's being sold today is at right now. So you can't replace the revenue fast enough
Mm.
with brand new startups. You're going to have to go into the acquisition business and convert, buy a practice just like they are, and put our brand on it instead of a competitor's brand.
So it sounds like there's some structural changes in your business model or your industry. So
Well,
where do you see the business ending up? Is it like, are they looking at doing exactly that, acquiring more, to build up to get big enough for private equity to buy the group, or?
well, the Texas State Optical's not. I mean,
Mm.
that was the differences that I had with the board. They wouldn't do that. And I thought, well, if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And they said, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. And I thought, well, that's not going to work. I mean, that's brought us where we're at.
Well, that's Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
Yeah. And so, all I could do is to say, I'm all for strategies that work. I mean, it didn't have to come from me. Someone else had an idea that could work. I'm all for it. But to just say, well, we're not going to do anything,
Mm.
would lead us down a path of total irrelevance. And I just didn't see any reason for me to stay and go through that. And so I I left at the end of June. But in fairness, it's a issue that's going on in the whole private practice optometry world. It's not unique to Texas State Optical by any means. But anytime and this is kind of the nature of business, markets change and industries change. And if you're going to continue to be successful year after year after year, you've got to be adaptive to the change. You've got to challenge convention and you've got to come up with new strategies to be able to survive. And I don't know if you remember, but I remember when Netflix came into the video rental business and they did it with mail order video.
Yep.
Well, Netflix doesn't offer mail order DVDs today
No, but I
because the
love that. I
market
love that
changed.
story because they had an opportunity for, um, what's the Blockbuster. Was one remaining Blockbuster left in the world, and that's in Bend, Oregon. And I remember this. It's more of a tourist attraction than anything, but I remember the story where they went and met with Blockbuster really early on, while I was still doing DVDs, and Blockbuster had an opportunity to acquire them at a very sharp price back then, and the arrogance of the board and management said, no, why would we want to buy something that is going to kill off our biggest profit center, which is late return fees?
Yeah. Yeah. So when it goes to something I'm a big believer in, Troy, and is critical in success in business, and that is mindset. You've got to be of a mindset to look at opportunities not as threats, but as opportunity, as changes. Don't look at change as threat, but as opportunities. And I think Netflix is a good example of how someone started a business model. It became aggressive. It took market share, but they realized they couldn't keep doing just what they were doing. And so now you access Netflix on your television,
Hmm.
and no one goes down and rents a VHS and pays the $2 fine for not rewinding it or late. And but Netflix knew that they needed to change, keep up. And that's going on in every category of small business out there, is changing markets. And those markets change because consumers change. Consumers change.
Hmm.
And that's probably my biggest admonition to both the board I worked with as well as small businesses. If you want continued success, stay close to and listen to your customers.
Yep.
And there's a variety of ways to do that. You don't have to go out and spend $50,000 on research.
Yep.
It's as simple as just talking to them,
Hmm.
figuring out the way their buying behaviors are changing and evolving, and then figure out a way to address that. And if you do, you'll be fine.
Yeah, Netflix is a great example of that, of listening to your customers and looking ahead and changing strategy. I read probably 5 or 6 years ago, so it'll be much more than that now, but they were spending $8 billion a year to create their own content, their own shows and movies, etc. And just a side note, I often, probably every 3 months, when my daughter complains she can't find anything to watch on Netflix, on Disney, on Binge, I go on a little rant and say, back in my day, I used to have to get on my BMX. I grew up in a country town, ride to the video store, take an hour to choose a movie, ride home. Sometimes it wasn't the right movie. Sometimes it didn't work. So don't complain to me that you can't find anything from the couch to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's an example. As much as I take pleasure in the story and enjoy looking at the chain, but that's an example of how she's a consumer today.
Yeah.
And her expectations and the way she wants to access entertainment is significantly different than yours or mine is. And the people who provide entertainment content, listening to someone like her, will always stay ahead and be the most competitive out there. And we're seeing that in front of our eyes with the evolution of Apple TV and what they've come out with, and other large platforms, Prime Video, and so it's Amazon's Prime Video, and so it's just a matter of it's the strategy, the core business uh, issues don't change.
Mm.
The marketplace does, the consumer does, and people will get in trouble because they they quit listening to customers, thinking, I know what they want. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what they want.
Mm.
And why would I change? It works fine.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. That answers our second question. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does, and how it makes money. Next question, how did you start out? Maybe tell us a bit what you did before starting there with the market research and the
I
market.
was I had a company in the 90s called Marketing Management Group, and we did market strategy based upon consumer research. So a company would come to me with a marketing problem, and once I understood that, then and who the target customer were, then I would develop a research study protocol, and I would apply that, gather the data, and then use that data to form a strategy of how they should go forward. And I didn't implement, I gave it to them. They could ignore it if they wanted, but I went out and listened to the customers for them, and then came back and said, here's what you need to do to be more responsive. And that's, as I mentioned, that's how I first met Texas State Optical, is I got hired to do something just like that. So I was doing that. And prior to that, I was in the ad agency business and was more on the advertising, the promotion side of things. And I just, you know, I studied advertising and marketing in college, and I was always just fascinated with the consumer behavior aspect of it. Um, I recognized the important role that advertising and promotion had, but it's only one fourth of the marketing discipline. And there were a couple of other areas in the marketing discipline that I was more interested in, and research and product development, and the distribution, and how you go about setting pricing, and all of those types of things were fascinating to me, and they were all foundational to the consumer research side of things, or the consumer's position in it. We can have the best product in the world, but if we price it wrong, we either go out of business because we don't aren't profitable enough, or we can't get into business because someone comes along and delivers it at a better price.
Yeah.
And so that,
So, so when you started at Texas State Optical in 2000, how old were you then?
um, gosh, I'd have to do math in my head, Troy.
25
Um,
years ago.
yeah, so I was, early 40s,
Yep.
early 40s, yeah.
And
So
do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of Texas State Optical?
yeah, when we started, we had 100 locations, and the average revenue was $500,000 a location. We got it to 130, and the average revenue was well over a million, million one, million two per location. Um, I didn't have the ability, and my role did not involve me impacting profitability of the individual owners, because we got paid a percentage of their volume to use our brand. And so I had to use that revenue to because we were a cooperative, and by its design, not intended to make a profit. We were to take and reinvest that money back into principally the growth of locations, and then putting forward using that new locations to build the aggregate revenues over a period of time and grow those. And we were able to do that. We lowered the average age, just by targeting a younger demographic, and people that actually uh, were eager to have their own business but had no idea what to do. And so we gave them kind of a template of here's how you do it. We made arrangements for all of the resources necessary, including the financing. We had a contractor to do the build out. We had a designer that would help them design their location. None of this, they were not obligated to use any of this, but the fact that they had never done this before and they didn't know really what they were doing, they tended to just take our word for it and go along. But the most important thing, we gave them a sense of community and mentorship with established optometrists that had very successful practices. And so you could be brand new, and that's 28, 29 years old, opening your own business, and pick up the phone and talk to somebody in their 40s that had a $2 million office, and basically say, how did you do it? And they'll say, here's what you need to do.
Mm.
And that kind of mentorship, really, as much as anything, caused the organization to grow revenue wise. I was more involved with planning the locations, recruiting the young docs, persuading them that this was a course, and we were the best option. And then once that got done, and then I would pair them up with a older but successful office and mentor them along that way. And so it just worked out great. It really did create a sense of family among all of us, because those older established practices really felt an ownership in the success of the younger ones.
Mm.
And it was great to watch happen.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And when you started in 2000, roughly how many full-time equivalent team members were there, and how many were they uh, at its peak, I guess?
We had three when we
Yeah,
started in 2000, and at its peak, we had 16 at
great.
the corporate level.
Yeah, yeah,
And six of those were in the field and working with somewhere between 20 and 25 locations each as kind of their consultative um, manager. We
yeah.
called them practice consultants. And again, they were there to give advice and direction, but nobody was required to listen to them. It was their own business. We coined an attitude that says we believe in everybody's right to make bad decisions, because it's their money. So if they want to make a bad decision, that's up to them. We did everything we could to prevent that from happening and giving them good advice, the mentorship direction, but ultimately it was up to them. And then we had 10 people that were at administration, marketing, and of course me. So it was never a big corporate team.
Yeah. A fun fact, John, Australia is the highest franchising nation in the world per capita.
Hmm.
Mm,
Wow.
yeah.
How do you think that is?
Don't know. It might have just been early adopters, stealing what was going on in America and brought it out here. I don't know. I guess we are similar to the US. We're quite an entrepreneurial nation. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
I did not know that. That's interesting. There's
When
got
was
to
the,
be something in the DNA.
yeah. Yeah, well, I guess we are similar to how America was settled. We were, shipped out here as convicts from the UK, and we had to make it work, didn't we? So,
Well, Australia's, to the degree I'm knowledgeable of it, has always impressed me with a real sense of individual spirit and independence.
mm,
And that kind of lends itself to entrepreneurism, which the franchise model becomes just a easier path down
yeah,
that road.
yeah.
Why reinvent a wheel? Just apply it and make money doing it.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
In terms of what?
I guess work-wise, yeah, your work career.
Um, well, I don't think I have.
Mhm.
And I still feel there's a lot to do. I feel like what I've done, I've never looked at it as, well, I've been successful. I looked at it as I've made a difference to a degree.
Mm,
And as long as I feel like what I'm doing and the time that I put in and effort and energy is making a difference, then that's what motivates me. And when I don't feel it's going to make a difference anymore, then I'll find someplace else to do something to make a difference. And I hope at the end of my time here on earth, um, I don't believe in retirement. I don't believe in the concept of it. And so we all have a limited number of years. So I hope by the time I'm at a point where I'm no longer um, physically capable, that I'll still figure out a way to make a difference. And with telecommunication the way it is today, you can you can be pretty effective and never leave the house. I mean, it's amazing.
and so, what does success look like to you?
Success is, for me personally, success is realizing my purpose and believing that I am living and achieving my purpose of making an impact with others, lifting them up, and developing leadership in the people around me. And so it's uh, if I can look around and believe that that team that I started with and grew to a larger number is really developed in their own leadership skills and their own ability, and now are making an impact. Some of them have left the company, are making an impact where they are. Then I feel like I've done a good job. Kind of like a sports coach, in college. You get kids, you develop them, and you realize you're not going to have them forever, but you hope that they go on and either become just really great business people, or they become accomplished in whatever they decide to do. And I always kind of took that as my responsibility to the people that came to work for me, that I knew I wasn't going to keep them forever. I just wanted them to go on and really develop themselves, regardless of what it was they wanted to do. So being involved in that, doing that and accomplishing that is success to me.
Perfect question for you. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Listen to your customers.
Mm.
The number one thing. They will tell you everything. When I first started really getting involved in consumer research, I would tell people, I said, I feel like I'm cheating, because all these competitors are out there are just convinced they know what to do. You go out and you ask the customer, what do you want? Then you go do it. You feel like, well, I've got a real advantage over you because you never take the time to ask.
Yes.
And so, yeah, very much so. You need to listen. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to spend a bunch of money doing it. There are a lot of ways you can do that without spending a bunch of money. You just got to be willing to listen.
Yeah, such an obvious marketing tip that a lot of, especially small business owners and small businesses miss or don't even take up. Yeah. And how did you fund the business? I guess that's more around the acquisition.
We
Business
funded
from.
it through the investment of the member owners
Yeah.
to acquire it. And we did it through a couple of different ways. One was these were all franchisees, so they had to pay off a multiple of the royalty that they were contractually obligated to for the franchisor. So the franchisor who sold it to us said, all right, well, we want a multiple of that royalty as part of our compensation. And then they also owned a large optical lab. And they said, we want you to sign, each of you to sign a exclusive 10-year contract to use our lab. And so they, again, it's somewhat like the old cell phone models that say, I'll sell you the phone very inexpensively, but you've got to use our service for 3 years. And so it was a similar type arrangement. So it was creative from that standpoint, that these guys didn't have to go out and each come up with $500,000 and, fund it that way, but they had to pay off their royalty, and they were already paying a percentage of their revenues in royalty payments. So they just went to a bank and borrowed the amount of money and structured it so that that payment was equal to what they had been paying. And but now, instead of just renting, now they're buying ownership in it. So that's the way we did it.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
If I were going to start up and needed funding,
No, if you won the lottery, would you go
oh,
into? Yeah.
would I go? I might go into it. I wouldn't go into it in the conventional way. First of all, I don't believe there's a future in private practice healthcare. I just don't think there's a future in that. I think also another big constraint is the doctors, the providers, regardless of optometry or dentist or whatever. There's a big shortage of doctors. And then when you combine that with the fact that the young ones are not wanting a full-time employment opportunity, then you've got an adequate number, but they all want to work part-time. You need twice as many.
Mm,
And so what I would invest in is technology so that the service could be delivered without a dependence on a doctor.
mm,
And it's available today. It's not adopted in wide scale because of the political issues surrounding it. And there are many, but I would invest in that piece of it. But people are always going to need eye care,
yeah.
and they're always going to need glasses or contact lenses. So it's a good business from that standpoint.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
I think in my case, it was the frustration that came with believing that we had a real opportunity in front of us, but I couldn't get the owners of the company to be willing to make the decision to take the risk, necessary risk involved. And really the risk was minimal, but just the nature of it, it wasn't so much stressful as it was frustration. And if you allow frustration, I suppose, to grow enough, it can get stressful, but
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
To my customers, to my like the small businesses that I worked with,
Yeah.
probably leadership. And I have to work on it because I believe that it's a quality that requires intentional work all the time. It's not something you ever get to a point where you feel like, all right, well, I can check the box on that. I'll move on to something else. Second, though, behind that would be communication. I forget now who said it, but the saying is that the greatest illusion about a communication is the belief that it has occurred,
Mm.
or the
I
biggest
love
challenge in communication is the illusion that it has occurred. That's
I
what.
love that Peter Drucker quote, which is
Yeah.
communication is what the listener does.
Yeah. And so, much like listening to a retail customer, you have to listen to a business customer
Mm.
and find out what it is they want and then deliver that to them. I also liked Steve Jobs, who said customers don't know what they want until I tell them what they want.
Or Henry Ford, if I had have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
That's right. That's right.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Just trying to keep up with it. I mean, there were a few years there where we were opening up so many locations, and it isn't just the physical aspect of the build out and the stocking and the supply chains and all of that. It's the training of the people, bringing them along up to speed. And um, and in our case, we had several doctors who just felt like, well, I don't need to grow. That's why I've hired you guys. And I said, no, you need to come along with us here. And so and that's okay if you've got a handful of those people you're working with at one time. But if you've got a couple of dozen of those at one time, then it becomes challenging to do, especially with a team as small as what we had.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
The gratitude that comes from the small business owner, the intimate the intimacy between a small business and its customers. That is, there's something just beautiful about the fact that the person behind the counter is the person who pays the rent, pays the employees, and it has those one-on-one relationships with their customers in a community. And there's something just Americana for us about that, and it's beautiful to be in that business.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Trusting in the concept of faith and not allowing your mind to dwell on fear, things that you are imagining could go wrong and could be bad. I'm a believer that you find what you look for. And if you keep looking for all the bad things that can happen, they will. But if you also devote yourself to looking for the good and the opportunity, you'll find those as well. So that is a mind shift to replace, I call it replacing fear with faith. And that's an exercise that the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Daily reflection, spending some time each day thinking, because it's real easy to get up, grab a cup of coffee, run into the business, do what we did today, looks like yesterday, last week, without ever stopping and spending time on the business. So many owners spend time in the business. They never set aside time to reflect on the business. And I think that's best done each morning. And if your business opens at 8 in the morning and you want people there at 7:30, then get in there at 6:30 and give yourself an hour of quiet before the business starts.
Want specific advice to help you get your business through its number one growth challenge? Book a free 20-minute growth chat with me, Troy, the founder of Grow a Small Business. I'll recommend some resources which will help you grow your business with ease so you can live the lifestyle you've signed up for. Go to growasmallbusiness.com and click on Growth Chat. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
The experience. So when I was hiring somebody, I had a job description that that's one thing everybody should have. I mean, if you're going to hire people,
Mm.
take the time to figure out what you want them to do. And then once you do, write that down, and that becomes their job description. But then the tendency is I want to hire somebody that's got all this technical experience, this task experience. And instead, I think you're better off by hiring people with qualities. You've heard this. Hire what you can't teach and teach what you can't hire or can't, I mean, and teach them and develop them and hire what you can't teach. So leadership, common sense, communication skills, um, smart, someone who's smart, and those and work ethic. And those, if you focus on trying to hire those qualities, then that'll be tough enough. You know, now don't worry about, well, they've got to have 4 or 5 years of doing this job, especially at a small business level. Now, if you're hiring, a regional manager that's going to be responsible for, you know, 50 employees or something like that, then that's different.
Yeah.
But you're hiring people inside of a small business. Maybe you've got a total of 10 employees. Then what you want is you want the qualities that make up a good team, and you can teach them the technical skills that are necessary.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Well, a good solid set of standard operating procedures, because if you operating procedures will let you run the train on time. And if you don't have to focus every day on reinventing the schedule to run the train, you can focus on the teammate. There's a reason that a professional sports team spends an awful lot of time in drills on plays and execution of the plays, because they know that in doing that, they are creating a culture of expectation and teamwork. And by doing that in your business, then you create this atmosphere where everybody understands their responsibilities in the role, in the delivery of service, and you don't end up with the drama like you do if you're just letting everybody kind of do what they want to do. And a lot of small businesses don't put the kind of structure in that's needed to do that. So
Tell our audience how you've handled balance,
a balance of what?
work-life balance.
I've never believed in that. What I do believe is work-life integration.
Mm.
And so a balance suggests that an equal amount has to be, or it's going to be out of whack or out of balance. And I think work-life integration to me is that my work becomes an integral part of my life, and my family understands that. In my case, my spouse also, she owns her own business. And so I understand that. And so I help her and support her in that. She helps and supports me in this. And then I prioritize things that when my kids were younger, I would just not schedule a meeting in conflict with something. And I've been fortunate that for the most part of my career, I've been in control of my calendar.
Mm.
So I can do that. If you're not, and most small business owners are, so that they'll look at it as more of an integration with their life as opposed to trying to balance it, because, you just can't afford that. Businesses need what they need, and families need what they need, and so it's not, I'll give half here and half there. It's 100% on both sides. So,
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
oh, one of the things that I recognized early on that was really important, and I sat down in my early 40s and wrote down a personal growth plan, and identified areas that I wanted to strengthen in my own capabilities. And I do that every year. I mean, I I use the week between Christmas and New Year's every year to sit down, take a look at last year, and decide what I want to do going forward this year. And then I identify, right now I've got 6 areas that I want to work on, or my are the pillars of my personal growth plan. And then I look for resources and tools in each of those areas and schedule them throughout the year as to the way I'm going to invest in, whether it's a book I'm going to read or a workshop or a course I'm going to take. I've been doing that for 20 years, and I think it's critical. And I expected it and built it into my performance reviews of my employees.
Mm.
They had to come up with their own personal growth plan, and it became part of my evaluation of them. And all of them would tell you today that's one of the best things I ever did because they are better people today.
Mm.
They they've grown through it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of HR studies show that pay is the fifth reason why someone chooses to work where they do. And above that, one of the items above that often is being developed by their manager.
Mhm.
So you must have done our 12-week people program, John, because pretty much everything you've said so far is bang on, is in that program. Yeah. Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yeah, most of my mentors, you know, I've had people that I've worked for or worked with that have come into my life for 2, 3, maybe 4 years at a time, and I learned from. But then I also sought through this personal growth plan people that were strong in the areas I wanted to grow in, and I looked to them as mentors. And so I consider Dale Carnegie a mentor of mine.
Mm.
I'm a student of John Maxwell, and so he's a mentor of mine. Napoleon Hill. And so some of these classic authors of personal development, I consider them to be mentors. And so, and there's a guy, is a pastor, he's passed away now, but Gary Smalley is a wonderful man that had a beautiful ministry of teaching marriage, how to develop and strengthen a marriage. And so I consider him to be a mentor of mine in my relationships. So yeah, I believe in them a lot.
Well, I assume you had a board of directors. If so, how often did they meet? How big was the board? And did you have any independence on the board?
Well, we had over the course of the 25 years, the board went from 9 people to 12 people.
Oh,
Um,
right. Mm.
it, yeah. Keep in mind, it was member-owned cooperative. So
Mm.
up until 2014, they were all doctors that owned offices in the network. Um, most of whom, many of whom,
Hmm.
weren't really knowledgeable what a director does.
Yeah.
So in 2014, I made an I advised that we take the 9 positions on the board and we take 3 of them and dedicate them to outside directors, people that aren't doctors in the organization, but they're in the industry and they can come bring another perspective, and they're all business people. And so when we did that, it was a tremendous change because we began to get a more diversity of thought.
Yep.
We got more perspective of the industry at large and not just focusing myopically on what we're doing. And then the doctors felt that they were being um, manipulated in some ways by these outside Svengalis. And so they wanted to expand the board to 12 to give them 9 doctors and 3 outside people. And I don't, that was kind of ridiculous, but so 12 people. Then we would meet, for the longest time, we met every other month.
Yep.
And, the role of the director is to really set the course of the company, the strategy and the direction. And if they do that well, you don't have to meet often.
Yep.
You do quarterly meetings, you do results, you do key metrics of the performance towards a plan that has been developed. A 5-year plan says, okay, John, how are we doing? And but if you don't have the plan because you can't make a decision, then you want to meet often to just talk about things, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was those were part of the difficulties in working with a group of people who really didn't understand the role of a director.
Yep. And myopic, good little optometrist
Yeah,
pun or joke
yeah,
there.
yeah.
All right, John, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Change, because it's so easy to just keep doing it. You can want to change. I mean, I want to lose weight, you know, but you got to do the work to make that happen. And it's no different in organizational change. It could even be argued it's more complicated because me losing weight's really just me dealing with me. Organizational change in a small business is you got at least employees that you got to deal with.
Mm.
And a lot of times, certainly in the experience that I had with doctors' offices, those employees really run the show because we're scared we're going to lose them. They'll leave and they'll quit. And then what I be? So implementing change is probably one of the most difficult aspects uh, for a small business. Probably for a big business too, but definitely for a small business.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Think and Grow Rich,
That was Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill,
Okay,
1934. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Because it lays out these kind of 13 principles, the initial 13 principles of what is really critical to be able to be successful. And not just in terms of money,
Mm.
but in a rich life. And it all starts with mastering your thoughts. So,
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
any what?
Um, any great podcasts or online
Oh,
learning tools you use for your own professional
well,
development?
I listened to John Maxwell's podcast. Um, and then I will occasionally, because I read a lot. I'll read 2 or 3 books a month, and occasionally the author of a book will also have a podcast, and so I will, while I'm reading that book, I will listen to the podcast. And once I move on to a new one, I oftentimes don't go back. Maxwell's one that I continue to listen to, but I would have to say that one in
Yeah.
particular.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Well, I would say the way that you manage your calendar and your schedule is really critical. And starting with that, blocking off the time to do some thinking about your business,
Mm.
and then keeping a schedule. Um, One of the things that I believe is really important is developing a commitment to always do what you say you're going to do.
Mm.
And oftentimes we treat that real casually. And when we're dealing with the family or even our employees, sometimes there's forgiveness in that. I mean, if I tell my wife I'm going to do something and I don't do it, she loves me, she'll put up with it. But when we're dealing with the public and we make a commitment or a promise, or we tell them, we're going to order that for you and it'll be here in 4 days, we got to make sure we actually deliver on it and do that. And one of the ways you help keep track of all of that is through both your calendar and then a reminder system to put down. And don't trust your success to your memory. And I got started a long time ago with a daytimer,
Hmm.
a little pocket calendar daytimer system. Then I moved to a Franklin Covey calendar system, and now I work in an Apple environment, and so I use the Apple tools that have that. But I think those are very important, and people they don't think of that as a business tool.
Hmm.
But it's true, and that discipline's important.
Final and my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Start,
Ha.
because what we do is we get our thoughts, we've got big plans, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then we kind of convince ourselves, or at least I did. Well, I need to study on that before I can really start. I need to get perfect at it before I can start it. And I'd say the only way you really become excellent at something is by doing it. I've got a friend who, his profession, his job, he owns the business, is he leads expeditions to the top of Mount Everest.
Hmm.
So if you want to climb Mount Everest, I can hook you up. He'll work with you. But it requires, if you're not a mountain climber, like, and that scale, it's a 2-year training program to develop. And I asked him, I said, well, what type of thing do you train people on to get ready to climb Mount Everest? And he said, the only way to learn how to climb mountains is by climbing mountains. So we start with smaller mountains. And what you learn by the climbing of those enables you to climb the next mountain. And I think there's a philosophy in that says the learning is in the doing. And you can learn to some extent by reading and preparing, but sooner or later you got to pull a trigger and actually just get started at it. And I was guilty of probably wasting 20 years where I could have gotten started earlier. But I thought I was intimidated by what I didn't know instead of passionate about learning and doing. So,
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that. I do 13 hours a week of professional development on 1.5 or 2 speed. I can't sit down and read a book these days because I'm too old and will fall asleep within a minute. So yeah, if I just listen to audio books, it's about 144 books a year, so 3 a week.
yeah.
Yeah, so important.
Oh, very. I just worked out today and I'm listening to a phenomenal book. I'll pass it along by Robert Cialdini called Influence.
That's one of my favorite books. I just re-listened. So I listened to the second edition earlier this year. It's 20 hours long, but a brilliant book. You can't put it down. Yeah.
I'm in my second time through it. I'm on the 5th chapter the second time through, so I've got a couple more chapters before I finish them. Yeah, it's tremendous. But I do that too. When I work out or walk or do things like that, I've got AirPods in, and no need to.
Influence got so many great vignettes in it, especially he talks about his own experience of being caught out by compliance officers. It's quite hilarious. My favorite story is the toy executive, his next door neighbor, when he realizes the strike 3, you're out. And I'm halfway through Persuasion as well, so I'm not sure if you listened to that one.
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
did he like that?
He wrote that after Influence. I think he wrote the first edition of Influence in the early 80s. So second edition came out a few years ago. Yeah.
He's added the 7th element to it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Unity.
Yeah. The Persuasion's a great book as well. I'm halfway through that.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks. I'll get that one.
Thanks for your time today, John. I really enjoyed our chat. In the early 90s, did some market research and marketing consulting in an optical retail franchise business. And then in 1999, the franchisees asked you to help them buy the franchisor out. It took a year or so. And so in 2000, you started as president, grew it from 100 locations to around 130, doing around 130 million annual revenue with 3 to 16 team members in the head office. You left the business a few months ago after structural issues in the industry are seeing the business declining now down to around 60 locations. So congratulations to you on the growth of that business and your business journey so far.
I appreciate the invitation. I've enjoyed it, Troy. Thank you.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.